So we're recording. Now we're officially recording. Let's just dive in. I think that was absolutely perfect.
Okay, cool.
Your description. So today's episode is about sad girl vibes. We're two Geminis, so we know that vibe very well.
Yes,
But I think I'm Deandra. This is Rocio. Beautiful, gorgeous. Can eat like a dinosaur and
I
still
can.
look thin. And we're talking about sad girl vibes today.
Exactly. And Deandra, you and I were kind of chatting about what that meant for me right before you started recording. And what I mean by that is for a long time I have identified myself with sad music, sad movies. It's kind of like inherent tragedy in art and film and books. And that has brought me a lot of comfort. And I've often told myself, oh, I'm a deep feeler, like I'm very sensitive. And so this music, this content speaks to my soul. And that is beautiful. But it got to a point along my healing journey in which I realized it was time for me to take responsibility up with my over identification with that sadness because that wasn't serving me in who I wanted to become.
Yeah. I think that like I've always I love a good cry.
Yes.
I watched
Huge
The
crier.
Last House of the Dragon and just vomited from how much I cried. I do love a good cry, and I think what a good cry does is that it brings up the sadness, but it doesn't release it. And I think actually having conscious healing makes you realize that bringing it up is not enough. You have to let it go, but it is your identity. So I understand what you say with, I think sad girl vibes is this identity that a lot of people pick up because they're attracted to sadness.
Yes.
But their attraction to sadness, it comes from this untapped sadness that they don't actually dive in. They swim in, but they don't dive.
Yes, it's an unprocessed sadness, right? And that's probably linked to maybe trauma, and it doesn't have to be capital T trauma, right? It could just be more a breakup that you have not chosen.
Lower T, paper cut.
Yeah, a trauma that you haven't chosen to process. Maybe it's a breakup from 4 years ago, whatever the pain may be. So it's an unprocessed pain. And so then it expresses itself as this sadness on a surface level that's digestible to you. And I like that you brought up the crying thing because I love to cry, but I now where I'm at is that I use crying as a tool for catharsis, right?
Yeah.
And that means like, okay, let me not just cry from the surface level sadness. It's like, let's connect to that deep rooted pain and then let's alchemize that pain, right?
Yes.
What's it bringing up? What is like, the lower vibration attached to the pain? And then let me retell a story that's serving of me and who I am and transmutate that pain.
I think it's funny you say that because I think what healing has done to me is that I no longer, like, I used to watch like Forrest Gump clips. Like, I'm looking for clips that make me cry, like of tragic movies, of tragic music, like songs that make me like, Joni Mitchell has like there's a song by Joni Mitchell, um, both sides now with like an orchestra that it's like my go-to cry song. And my friend was like, we have to go see Inside Out too. And I was like, no, because it's going to make me cry. And that was, I know that sounds so random, but that was so different from me because now I'm not looking for the cry.
Yes.
And I think that I used to think healing was how I looked for media that supported my sadness, how I looked for media that enacted my sadness. And now I'm like, I don't think I've healed enough to realize that doesn't actually release.
Yes.
It relieves. Because it's so pent up.
Oh, and it's also more like it enables the sadness to continue. And it's more, what narrative are you telling yourself by continuing to identify with the sadness, which is comforting? It's probably more like the ego in you. And by ego, I mean the insecurities, the fears, the doubts, the familiarity of your story, right? So for me, that was a tragic love story. Cannot attract good men. If someone good comes, it's short lived.
Yeah.
Yada yada. And so when I started really, I don't want to say really healing, but I got to a level of healing where I could see how this identification with sadness wasn't serving me, I started to be very intentional about, as you said, let me not go to sad girl playlist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me,
Pixar.
yeah, no, and by the way, I loved Inside Out too. But my favorite movie used to be this. It's called In the Mood for Love. Stunning cinematography and inherently
Depressing.
depressing story. In most of the
Yeah.
rom-coms that I used to be very like attracted to that resonated the most were tragic. La La Land,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
Blue Valentine, so it's and so on and so forth. And then it got to a point where I was like, wait, I don't want to like I can still appreciate these films and love them, but I want to start surrounding myself with happier love songs. And something that is like much more serving to me is on YouTube watching shorts of happy couples. Like I'm obsessed
Yeah.
with Dylan Sprouse and I think what's her name, the model,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
something Palvin, whatever. They're just the cutest, one of the cutest couples. I love watching their clips. There's this other couple that I'm obsessed with. She's an Mexican American girl living in Korea, married to a Korean guy, makes very funny content. And I started to be very intentional with consuming that content of I want to change this tragic love story narrative that I have within me and start feeding myself happy content, right?
Yes.
And also watching movies like Crazy Stupid Love, which I also really
Yes.
enjoy, and just cheesy movies that I used to like scoff at, rom-com cheesy movies, because I'd be like, oh, that dumb happy ending, things wouldn't work out that way, right? And like it's yes, but also there's a benefit to me, to you, to believe, because at the end of the day, like our reality is made up of our beliefs, right? And what we
Yeah.
told ourselves over and over. And so if you're over here listening to Adele every single day, resenting men, or thinking that the world is out to get you, your boss is whatever, right? That is what's going to
Yeah.
manifest in your
Yeah.
life.
I think that for me, what I don't knock looking for sadness as a form of relief. I think what I thought relief was release.
Mm.
I didn't imagine that I could let it go or didn't have to live in me or be like the center of me.
Mm.
And when I started saying, I think you just reach this point of exhaustion. Like you're just so tired of carrying the sadness that you start to say, there has to be a way. And there has to be a person in the universe, even if it's I'm the first one, that lives in joy,
Mm.
that
Yes.
finds like why you're looking for Dylan Sprouse and his wife. And it was something that I was mentioning before. I have to believe, because I have examples,
Yes.
that there's somebody who has a completely healthy, happy relationship,
Yes.
that is true and loving and tender. And I just need to vibe at that frequency.
Yes.
And if I keep on feeding the sad girl vibes, as sad as it is, I'm not vibing at that frequency. And that's where accountability comes in and checking myself. And that's really hard because, and it was something that I mentioned before when we were talking, like, I've been wronged by a lot of people,
Mm.
but at the same time, I do have to see how I put myself in that position so I could put myself in a different one. And that's really hard because I think we confuse, it doesn't take away their villainy, but it does make us question our relationship to virtue.
Mm.
Like being the sad girl all the time, it does not make you the lover girl.
Well, yes, and I also feel that in my experience, the over identification and comfort of, living inside girl energy was that it fed my victim story, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was that I've been wronged in love, I've had endured so much pain, so much suffering, I've been played, poor me, these men. And then it got to a point where I just had to take responsibility for me allowing those experiences, calling those experiences into my life, attracting. I'm not saying that any person who has dealt with toxic relationships or whatever, they're responsible for it. But we must take enough ownership of having. It's a dance at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? And
Yeah.
unless someone is dragging you through the dance floor, which normally almost never happens, it does, but almost never. Anyway, right, I had to just face my bullshit and
Mm-hmm.
realize that wait a minute, it's comfortable to be in the victim story rather than do, just take a hard look at yourself in the mirror and say, oh, I'm allowing this, right? And I'm the common denominator in these tragic love stories or any type of tragedy stories that you're telling yourself or that you're experiencing rather. And then when I did that, it kind of coincided with this, with a very deep depression that I went into.
Yes.
And it literally was the universe, very spiritual,
Yeah.
saying, okay, honey, boo boo, it's time to face your bullshit. It's time to face this pain, this suffering that you have identified with and over identified in the past, and start to really take that ownership, right?
Yeah.
And when it wasn't overnight, it was a long healing process, but I I am on the other side of that, feeling freer and more whole, and realizing that sadness is a very important emotion, like
Yes.
anger, love, right, joy,
Yeah.
what have you, and then there's disgust, and there's another one that I'm forgetting, fear, obviously, and they all serve a function. But that's why I love Inside Out, the movies, right? Because they do such a nice job of conveying the importance of feeling all of your emotions.
Hashtag Pixar.
Exactly, exactly.
They do the best.
And there are those people on the other spectrum, right? There are the people who over-identify with joy and excitement, and I'm always happy.
Yeah.
And that's also a lie. It's a lie. It's a facade. It's an illusion, delusion, whatever you want to call it. In that those people are resisting or trying to shove down the rest of the emotions, right? And again, it's really all just a tale of all of our emotions serve a purpose. They're all beautiful. And our job is literally to be a 4-year-old. What do 4-year-olds do? They wake up happy, they just nap, they feel great, they're hugging mommy, everything's amazing. Then they drop their milk, they start wailing, they're so sad, it's the end of the world. And then they're angry because they're sleepy and they're throwing a tantrum, and they're punching the mom. And then literally 10 minutes later they're happy again. That is actually the job of us adults, to allow the emotions to come, process them, not over identify with them, and then move on.
Well, I think that's the whole point of Sad Girl Vibes. We're over identifying with the emotion of sadness, but I think it comes not because of, I think it comes actually with a lack of faith. Not I think it's often associated with self-pity, and it does enact self-pity, but I've over identified with my sadness because I just didn't believe in my happiness. And I remember I was dating this guy and I said, my greatest dream is to be a happy person with moments of sad rather than a sad person with moments of happy.
I love that.
And he had sex with me. He was like enamored. He was like, this is the wisest woman I've ever met. When I said it, I was like, that's my truth.
Yes.
I have made sadness my identity. And it's not because I think often it's painted as we just love the sadness. We're so attracted to the sadness. And I really feel that for a very long time, I just genuinely believed, and it's from my childhood and maybe from my demeanor, that it was just all I could have, and that it was the forefront, and it's the main theme of life. And it's kind of true when you think of like media too, that it's all framed. Even how we learn history, it's war after war after war. We live in a world that really makes happiness feel fleeting and like these big moments that then go away. And I've been in a lot of depressions, but I think what have gotten me out of my more recent ones and made me try to stabilize is exhaustion. I think you need to follow. There's, I'm reading The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron. She talks about jealousy is a map. And I think exhaustion is a map too. I think those two feelings, who you're jealous of and why you're tired and in what ways, totally is a roadmap for you healing yourself.
Yeah, I love that, right? And it's interesting to me when there are people that over identify maybe with anger or sadness or joy.
Yeah.
Because
angry girl vibes exist.
And anger is a much, I don't know if it's an easier emotion to digest because it's fueling, right? It's action driven. You're kind of doing something about it. Whereas sadness, like Inside Out, to you're wallowing. You're just kind of like things feel heavy and so on and so forth. And again, right, we're on our journeys to feel our emotions, and ideally, we're all learning to feel them all equally and not be afraid of one or the other.
Yeah.
To find that inner freedom, no, because I like what you said about your goal was to be a happy person that experienced sadness, whenever. And for me, it was always just inner freedom, and what that meant was being able to be in all of the emotions that are within me. I'm a human. I have a lot of feelings, yada yada, but not fixate or stay stuck in them. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this today, because for a long time I was stuck in sad girl energy because it was comfortable, it's what I
Yeah.
knew, and it was familiar, and there was so much content readily available for me to be able to connect.
Yeah. Well, I have, because you mentioned about like the happy girl vibes and how they might not be real. And I think they are real. I think they're my opposite.
Mm.
And that's why I don't think they're real. I think that the happy girl vibes, they challenge me because they fixate on joy. And I don't do that. I'm learning to do that. And it's really hard because I was fixating on sadness and that felt easy to me, that felt more me.
Yeah.
And I'm changing my identity. And sometimes in changing our identity, we feel it's inauthentic.
Mm.
And but to see a genuinely happy person, it challenges me because I'm like, how are you living in that? Especially because some of my examples of happiness were numb.
Okay.
They weren't happy, they were just ignoring issues.
Well, yes, and that's what I meant about happy girl vibes, which is very adjacent to what's it called, spiritually bypassing. When
Okay.
something inherently, I don't want to say bad, but something inherently sad or heavy
Yeah,
happens,
bad.
right?
Yeah.
Something unfortunate. And then, spiritually bypassing is, oh, but what is the meaning in this? What's the bright side of this? What can you learn from this? And
It's
those
like,
things are
it's like bright side.
well, right. And, those takeaways will come in time. But in that moment, what is not should, but what is more kind of like natural to happen is you're sad, you're angry, you're resentful, whatever the emotion may be. And like, let's actually feel that. And then maybe 4 months down the line, you'll have that perspective, right? It's kind of like going through a breakup, you're devastated, and you have some fucking spiritual bypassing insensitive friend being like, he was an asshole anyway, you deserve so much better. Let's look on the bright side. Let's get out there and date and whatnot, when you are still wallowing in the pain and the aftermath of having lost this person that maybe you thought was going to be your life partner, right? So there's kind of like a place and a time for the emotions to be. And I also, I was talking about the happy girl vibes, referring more to those people that are using them as a way to escape and numb the pain, the fear, the doubts that may be there. And so it's like different sides of the same coin, right? On the one side, we've got us, sad girl energy, and on the other one, it's happy girl energy. And guess what? We're both, in a sense, you know what I mean, over identifying with one emotion, and there's many other ones to feel and process, but maybe we don't have the tools yet.
Yeah, and life is a journey. I think I've been, unfortunately, and sometimes I feel a lot of guilt, the spiritually bypassing friend, because I have always been taught and believed that if you wrap a bow on it, it becomes a gift. And what I'm trying to learn, and I haven't fully, admittedly learned, I don't know if it's true, is what if pain is just pain?
Yeah.
What if stoicism, which we've been talking about, something that we really want to pick up, is not about turning pain into positive, but accepting that pain is pain.
Right.
And then working on what positive is positive.
After a while.
Like totally
right?
separate. And I think sometimes we confuse, shame is motivation, crying is release. And then no, crying can be relieving, but it's not necessarily releasing. And learning those separations and accepting that bad could just stay bad has been tricky for me because I I feel like we are taught that strength is just turning everything into a positive. And I feel that some of the people that taught me that weren't exactly positive people. They were just numb people
Right.
that knew how to act positive.
Right, right. And so for me, I've it's interesting because I've always chosen to present the happy, lighthearted version of who I am
Mm-hmm.
because I do have this side to me. But then, I also have this very dark, sad side to me. But I knew inherently that people don't like a sad person, right? No one wants a
Mm-hmm.
sad person at the party telling of, their suffering and whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, no one likes a Debbie Downer.
Yeah.
They don't. They like a fun, bubbly, blah, blah, blah. And so I just, in my 20s, my early 20s, that's what I always presented. But I was very sad and I would cry myself to sleep frequently
Yeah.
for a number of reasons. And it got to a point where I wanted to merge those two sides of me and present more the side that I was feeling in the moment,
Because you
right?
got tired. Because I think that I really do think that exhaustion is the key to growing. Because I
Mm,
really do feel like I've been sad so many times, but lately I've just been tired of the sadness.
mm,
And that has ignited me to focus on faith and belief in a way that is more survival oriented. Like, I just need to believe it gets better
mm.
because I'm so tired of the narrative that it doesn't, or that you get better at things not getting better. Like, I'm like, snooze, okay, how can you live a happy life thinking that everything is negative, but you could be the positive amidst the negative? Like,
Mm.
there's something even in that that may sound nice, but still is dark.
Yeah, and I think that when you say tired, I don't know that that's the word that I would have described to. I'm sorry, that I would have used to describe as a feel for me to want to merge, the sad and the happy, or to be like, I'm over it. I think for me, it was more like, I would call it like feeling fed up. And more than anything, I was bored of the
Yeah,
story.
I
You know
think
what I
it's all the
mean?
same.
Right, being bored of like, here I am, here I go again with my sob story to myself, or over identifying with the sadness, and also with like
Yeah.
the two sides of it. More than anything, it for me, when I was like, it didn't feel sustainable anymore to keep
Yeah.
these like fragmented identities, right? And
Yeah.
it got to the point where
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s, and my core group of friends only knew the happy side of me. And I understand how difficult it is to then go to people and say, actually, there's this whole other side of me that I've never shown you, and it's here. People have a hard time grasping, change within you, because people tend to have a fixed idea of who you are based on who you've presented.
Mm.
So what I did was like, you know what? I'm not dealing with this. I'm just moving halfway across the world and reinventing myself and
Yeah.
showing my full self, right? Because
Yeah.
before I would modulate, right? Like, only the happy side is going to get shown and exposed, and the sadness is for privacy,
Yeah.
right? That's behind
Yeah.
closed doors. I'm crying there. I'm not crying to my friends, God forbid.
Yeah.
Then I moved across. I went to Korea to teach English, and my one of the biggest motivators was for me to be vulnerable, and what that meant was own up the fullness of who I was, right? So I would meet people and I would kind of be like the most open and vulnerable I had ever been, because I wanted to not even merge, but I don't want to live a fragmented life anymore. It was like, this is who I am. I have these two contrasting sides. Sometimes I'm very happy, sometimes I'm sad,
Yeah.
and that's how it is, right? I love to cry. And again, right, that was a long time ago. I still cry, and I use it as a tool of catharsis, of releasing, of
And it's
processing.
necessary. It is
Yes,
necessary.
and not everyone, has as many emotions, or it feels as deeply as maybe I do. Or I also consider myself an empath, right? Where I walk into a room and I'm very perceptive of the energy and other people's emotions, and they do affect me.
Not mine.
I'm joking now. But anyway, like, you've made me lose my train of thought with that. All right, do we wrap it up? Do we move on?
I actually think that you tapped onto something that should be the next episode. And I think what you're tapping onto, and this is a preview of the next episode, is abandonment. And
Yes.
what we hide, the truths we hide, because we think someone will run away.
Yes.
And then we enter these relationships that we don't realize are in some ways built on our falseness as well.
Yes, absolutely. Because
So wait, but let's save it for the next episode because we're at 25 and I know you're already bored.
Oh yes, not bored though.
No, we're too freaking entertaining. So stay tuned. Next episode, abandonment. We'll see you in the engine.
That's right.
I think that was really
That was really
good. Oh wait.